What's up, friends, and welcome to SPDM TV. My name is not Mike Hilty, but I watch a lot of TV too. My name is Brian Larsen. I am part of the SPDM crew, and this week we're going to be talking about Castle, and I'm joined by Kyra Larsen, who also happens to be my daughter. So this should be fun. Welcome to the show. How's it going, Kyra?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Even though she's giggling like it, my daughter's actually a 20-year-old college student, so we'll see how this goes. Kyra, the show Castle. It came out in March 2009, and it was on ABC, starring Nathan Fillion and Stana Katic as Richard Castle and Kate Beckett, respectively. It was a homicide show that was based in New York City, and I remember watching it and just kind of wondering, how did you get into watching Castle?
I ended up watching it because you watched it. Don't remember a lot about the process of getting into it. It was just like one day it was now a TV show we watched.
Do you remember about what season it was we started watching it together?
I would say it was around season 3 because I remember having to go back and watch season 1 and 2 when I got older. And at the beginning, I didn't understand the importance of her mother's murder and looking into that case, which obviously has to do a lot with season 1 and him not supposed to be looking at it. So I remember having to go back and watch those, but I do remember her getting shot at the end of season 3.
Okay. Now, as I recall, the way I got into it is like a lot of other shows that I've watched or talked about on this podcast or others. Nathan Fillion was in a show called Firefly, which I really liked. And when he got show got canceled, his next show was this. So when I heard about it, I checked it out, and I was watching the first 2 seasons. And back in 2009, I believe you were a whopping 5 years old. So wasn't really something, I kept you up late watching during the week. But eventually, during time, I got divorced from your mother, and there were weekends when you would come over, and one of them I had the show on, and I don't remember which episode or where we were in it, but I think it was one of those nights where you weren't ready to go to bed yet, and we kind of watched something together, and I put this on, and you just felt like you really liked some of the characters. So was there any characters that you feel stuck out for you?
I mean, obviously the main 4, which I would say is Castle, Beckett, Esposito, Ryan, were all big favorites. They're dynamic. And then watching them with Montgomery and then Gates later on, like that dynamic of the police station and the force was probably some of my favorite people.
Well, good to hear as your father that you didn't say Castle and Alexis. So I'm pretty happy about that. Yeah, the big thing for me also was the dynamic that you mentioned, but the big one was actually Castle and Alexis. So let's break down some of the characters then individually. Team Castle, Team Beckett. Who are you?
Team Beckett, obviously.
Yeah. So what about Kate Beckett did you like?
What's there not to like? She's great. I feel like she's very strong. She's like well-rounded. She has a lot of character development through the years. Stands her ground. She was always a great character overall. I feel like there was a point I was going to make, but I forgot it. It'll come back.
They always do. So, she starts out, obviously she doesn't want anything to do really with the Playboy author kind of thing, but, first episode, season 1, somebody's killed that she recognizes came from one of his books. So she meets Castle, and they decide, she decides to bring him in kind of as a consultant for the first one, right?
Yep. Yeah. Ashley Tinsdale is the first body we see with the rose petals on her body and sunflowers on her eyes. And it ends up being, spoiler alert, I guess, if you haven't seen it, but it's been, 15, 25 years?
2009 would be 16 years ago. Since we're about to do 2025. And I'm so glad that my college-age daughter just said 25 years ago.
Yeah. I don't know why I couldn't do the math there, but it ends up being her brother who does it. But
I will let you know something, Kyra. In
What?
future, as we continue to record this, if you feel like doing any spoilers, you can just say, fuck you. You should have watched it already. It's not your fault. If you're listening to a Castle podcast, they probably have.
Perfect. Well, her brother ends up doing it, but it's Castle who really cracks the case, and you see how their relationship goes from there. I think a real turning point in their relationship is you see in I think it's season 2, episode 1. Or no, sorry. I think that would be season 3, episode 1. Season 2 ends with him going off to the Hamptons with his second ex-wife, Gina. I always get the ex-wife order mixed up, but second ex-wife, Gina, and he doesn't call. And we see that mirrored with Alexis's Princeton boy from the summer. But he had made her a bet if he could connect the pieces on this triple homicide and how they're connected before he could come back. And you see that episode end with Javier asking, so how long did you know this was about counterfeit before he did? So you could see that she wanted him to come back, but she didn't want to ask for him to come back. And I feel like that's a big turning point in their relationship.
Agreed. Very much agreed. So let's move on to Castle. What did you enjoy about Richard Castle as a character?
He's funny. I don't know. I liked Castle, don't get me wrong. Like, he's a great character, but he's definitely, I wouldn't even call him my second favorite character. Like, after Beckett, I would say he comes slightly lower. So maybe you have some better pros for him than I do that you might want to give for the crowd.
So, yeah, okay. Again, I've mentioned this before also. There's a lot, I try to identify with somebody in a show that I really like. That's when I like a show better, is when I feel I can identify with them. And I always liked Castle for his sense of humor, taking things lightly, but also being smart enough and to be able to jump into cases and help solve, and confident enough to stand up to Beckett and go toe to toe with her when they had arguments. And also the relationship he did have with his daughter, Alexis, and how, it's one of those things you always wish as a parent that you were able to do more for your kid. And he had the ability to, provide her money and, a nice house and education and all those other things that you wish you're able to do for your kid. And he's able to do it. So it was just a character that always stood out to me. Plus, I thought Nathan Fillion did a great job as an actor doing his, shtick of ruggedly handsome and being a writer and joining the writing groups that he was part of. And they brought in other authors, legit authors, into the, like James Patterson, and it was Patterson. Sorry. You will learn. And if you haven't already, I get names wrong all the time. So I get corrected a lot. But yeah, I thought, I'm definitely Team Castle, and but not for any reason more than just liking him as a father. Beckett, also an amazing character who, like you said, a strong woman who could stand up for herself and continue to. She was able to physically handle herself in situations, and tenacious. She needed to find out who killed her mother, and that theme ran through the show for 8 seasons. And even when you thought it was closed, it kept coming back, right?
Yeah, you see it tied back in to the season 8 main plot line. So I think they did a great job of pulling that through all 8 seasons and really making that a driving plot line for the show.
Yeah, there was, I think, season 5 or 6, where they introduced the drug dealer, the black guy. I can't think of his character's name now off the top of my head. Anyways, he was, the guy who basically was the evil side of the Lockstack group and did the kind of involved with the killing. I believe he's the one who hired out the guy who murdered her, but they only dealt with that for like a season, and not a season, an episode in season 5. So they dragged it along in a good way, but they didn't hit you for it like episode after episode after episode. As the seasons went on, they kind of stretched it out, which was nice. The other, I think, relationship we should talk about a little bit. Let's talk about Esposito and Ryan, the fellas.
I love Ryan. I think Ryan's probably my second favorite character if I had to pick one. I feel like he, obviously there are times where Castle too, but Beckett and Esposito are willing to kind of like color outside those lines and really play on the edges of certain situations. And Ryan, you just see as like that black and white by the book, like counterpart that you can really build some characterization off of with that. I think some great examples are when she's hunting her shooter at the end of season 4, and she's hiding information from Gates about that it's that murder of, it's like Orlando Costes, something like that. Orlando is the one who gets killed because he broke into Montgomery's house to steal his wedding book to end up getting back to Mr. Smith to destroy that file of blackmail, which all relates to her mother's case. But she's hiding evidence from Gates so she can stay on the case, and Javier's backing her on it. And they go to track down the shooter, which I'm drawing a blank on his name, but you end up seeing her dangling from a roof, and Ryan, with full backup and Gates, end up catching her from falling because Ryan ends up calling it in like he's supposed to. But I think that really shows, like, you really see Ryan as a black and white character compared to the other two. And another one that always comes to mind is when you're dealing with Esposito's dead partner, or not dead, but you think he's dead at the beginning of the episode, but him and it's Ike Thornton,
right,
end up going to try and steal the ledger. And that's one of the only times where you see kind of Ryan kind of fall into that gray a little bit, which is also more nice to see about their relationship, that he's willing to do that for Esposito because he's so black and white all the time.
Yeah, one of the episodes that sticks out in my mind about Ryan is when he goes back undercover.
Yes, absolutely.
And it is him. You just see a different side of him, and he explains it. Hey, when you go over undercover, you have to become somebody else, and you have to be that character again, that person. And he pulls it off great.
Yeah,
Fenton, yep. And he sees that girl and gets slapped in front of Jenny, his real wife. And yeah, that was an interesting way. How are you going to have that conversation? So yeah, this is my wife. Cole Maddox. That was the guy. That was the shooter.
Maddox. Thank you.
Yeah. So that episode too, one of the things, and I like this sometimes when they pull it off very well in TV. That was one of those episodes where they started that with her hanging off the roof, and then they were like 24 hours earlier, and then you build up to that again. And that was the famous where she thought she heard Rick Castle calling her.
Yes.
And she pulls her off the roof, and then that's when she goes and confesses her love for him.
Yes, that is season 4 finale.
Yeah. So let's talk about some recurring characters that came back. Well, you know what? Let's talk about Alexa and Martha. Alexis and Martha, who are living with Rick. Let's hear about them from your perspective.
I like them. I was watching it today just as like background noise. And I happened to watch the episode where Alexis goes off to Colombia. And it got me thinking about how, like, she is now, like, in the later seasons, like, my age. And, like, I started watching it when I was so much younger than her. And, like, how that progression of, like, my age along with her character, like, really is right around the same time. And how I feel like I can relate to her as a character so much on so many different levels. And I think she really does add a lot for the show in general and Rick's character.
Now, one of the things that you connect with or feel, is it that you're more mature than your father?
No.
You don't feel you're more mature than your father?
No, I do, but that's not, I wouldn't say that's where I like fully fully find the similarities.
Gotcha. So Martha, you got her living with him still. She is kind of a grown-up kid herself. She's an actress who is living off the fame of her son. And do you think that even though they have that, do you feel they have a strong relationship? Grandma Alexis and Rick and Martha?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like they're a tight bunch. I feel like they really feed off of each other on a lot of different aspects. I think they help each other grow throughout the whole thing and like deal with a lot of personal and like tough things, whether it's like Martha and Chet Palaburn or Alexis and Ashley or Alexis and Stanford and Castle and Beckett relationship wise and all that. Like you see a peek into their personal lives outside of just the crime aspect that and getting through those issues provides a lot of dynamic for the show.
So let's talk about Captain Montgomery. Let's talk about them both, Montgomery and Gates. What do you think about, or do you want to take them individually?
I feel like you got to take them individually. They're so different, and they provide so many different things for each of the characters, and like how the precinct changes when the switch happens.
Right. So Montgomery, we find out a lot of information about him as this. Basically, I think it would be season 3 is where he really develops more than just the somewhat father figure to her in her work environment, right?
Yeah, this is when we start getting tidbits of Gary McAllister and John Raglan, and that this whole thing dates back to the murder of Bob Armand in the alley, and how that plays into her mom, and how Montgomery's tied directly into it, and he has a major part in why her mom is dead.
So how did you feel? Because I know how I did. I'll get to it. How did you feel when she asked him, "Did you kill my mother?"
Like, how do you mean? Because
Sure.
you elaborate a little more.
So we're in a situation where she has trusted this man. He found her looking through her mother's case file when she was a beat cop and knew she was going to be special and pulled her out of that room, and she became a detective under his watchful eye, and he's been keeping an eye on her all these years to protect her, and she is grateful to him, obviously. But then she finds out he could be involved, and he was buddies with the two guys and part of that 3-man crew. And when she finds all this information out, instead of being 100% convinced there's no way this man who she has loved as a boss, first thing she does is, "Did you kill my mother?"
I mean, you almost like can't blame her. I feel like that's like as much as like that gratitude and that love is always going to be there. Like you just found out that one of the people that has been helping and driving this whole investigation and like with you from the start has something to do with it and has been holding information back. Like you can't help but wonder how deep does that go and how much does that like have to do with the actual murder. And so I feel like she had every right to ask that just straight out.
Good. I just wanted your opinion on it. It's one of those it can go any way. You see how you want. That's a great thing about well done TV shows, that you can have different perspectives on different characters or situations. So Captain Gates comes in and after Montgomery's killed, and now we have Beckett, who has to deal with somebody else who may not appreciate the relationship Beckett has with Castle.
Yeah, I don't hate Gates by any means. She has her redeeming qualities, she has her redeeming moments. However, I think they pushed too hard on the switch. I feel like I think we had Montgomery, who obviously cared about them, but almost let them do whatever they wanted. When it came to the precinct, like you never really saw a lot. Like we knew they had paperwork, but besides that, we didn't see a lot of regulation and all that stuff. I mean, we talked about budget cuts a little bit, but that's pretty much it. Where then we get Gates and we like ironclad by the book, and so we get a lot more of that just strict captain. And I just think that it was almost too much at times. I wish it would have been a little bit more like pulled back and casual. Not casual, but like, or I just wish there was more roundness from her, a little more character development, something to let her loosen up. But I just feel like her character is almost too much at the beginning.
That is a perspective of it. Good. Somebody I think we should have brought up earlier that was around since the first season, that's a background character at times, but also at the forefront, is Lainey.
Yes. I was honestly surprised you hadn't brought up Lainey yet. I don't see Lainey more as like a background. I'd put her right with all the other people we talked about. I'd like put her over, like, I know Montgomery has to do with like the murder and everything of her mother and everything, but I would put Lainey as more important than both captains almost. Just because she is there through the whole time, and we have the relationship of her and Esposito, and then her and Beckett. And this is one of the only times we see Beckett having like an outside friend that like she confides in, and we can see like her talk to Lainey about her and Castle and how that develops, and like Lainey in the morgue, and like they obviously we have that one scene with them. I think it's at Beckett's house or Beckett's apartment. And so you can tell that friendship is there, but I think Lainey plays a big role in the characterization of Beckett and Esposito.
I also feel she's someone who can call Castle out on his dipshit moves and get him to, hey, you're being an idiot, go talk to Beckett, or you're being an idiot, stop doing what you're doing, go fix it, and he listens.
I agree.
He's a little scared of Lainey. A little scared.
Yes. And I like the time with when Alexis does her internship with Lainey. I think that's a nice way to bring Alexis into that fold for just a little bit.
Yeah, that was a good take that got her involved more in storylines, which, nothing wrong with that. Great character. So, is there a reoccurring character or / storyline that we haven't talked about yet that you want to talk about?
I'd say there's two. Slaughter, Detective Slaughter.
Okay.
His role and how he plays a part in everything. And then Jerry Tyson, Mr. 3XK.
All right, let's tackle Slaughter first, because he only appeared in 2 episodes, I believe.
Correct.
He is played by Adam Baldwin.
Okay.
And Adam Baldwin was on Firefly with Nathan Fillion. And he was a star of, not the star. Nathan Fillion was obviously the star, but he was one of the crew on the ship. So he was in every episode with him, which I was going to get at later, but it was something that I saw, and it carries on today with The Rookie, that Nathan Fillion brings in old actors that he's worked with on shows, because they had Gina Torres on an episode of Castle. I believe Alan Tudyk was on there. So he brought in some of his Firefly people, and Ryan and Esposito have both been on The Rookie at different times. So it's a great thing you can do in Hollywood when you become a higher up star, that you can, get an opportunity to bring your friends onto Castle. So, or The Rookie, or whatever project you're working on. But yeah, Slaughter, using him, it was the anti-Beckett, the guy who's just, I'm going to do what it takes to get the job done, and I don't care if I hurt somebody doing it. But yeah, really enjoyed the Slaughter character.
Yeah, I think, and that happens right at the end of season 4. So like right before we get Beckett and Castle finally together. And so I think that really pushes Beckett to finally admit her feelings when she sees him with another detective. And I think it really, really shows their dynamic in like a different light. Like, we talk, for the audience, I'm an English major, so I talk a lot about characters and characterization and story plots and developing in a lot of my classes. And we talk a lot about one of the easiest ways to show characterization between 2 characters is to throw a third in there and see how the character interacts with that third character and play off of that. And I think throwing Slaughter in there in that time of like uncertainty between Beckett and Castle really stirs a lot up. And shows a lot, especially when in the end Castle finally turns to Beckett for help after Slaughter tries to force a kid to fake a witness statement, implementing someone, and you see that she was helping him all along and has surveillance footage of a car proving that the person that Slaughter's gonna arrest is actually innocent.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, they were fighting, and it was getting to the point where they were going to break up as partners. They didn't want to be around each other, so he ended up meeting or seeing Slaughter on TV, and he's like, "I'm going to go work with this guy," and it just
Yes.
did not fly.
Yes, it's
So
shortly after the sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's shortly after the 47 seconds episode where Castle finds out that Beckett has known all along that he confessed that he loved her when she got shot. So he's acting out in a lot of ways with the stewardess and then with Slaughter because of all that and finding out that she knew.
So 3XK, that Jerry Tice, correct? Tyson, Jerry Tyson. Let's talk about him.
I think he's a great plot line. He comes up a lot. He's got a few reoccurring episodes because you get the initial, and then we get Ryan's gun.
So Jerry Tyson, he was played by the actor Mike Mosley, shows up in, actually there was a murder, and you thought it was the 3XK killer, but it was actually somebody else, and Jerry Tyson convinces the police to get him out of prison, right?
Yes, that's not wrong. I wouldn't describe it that way. I would more say I'd add a little more detail where, yes, the murder is done by someone else, but it's under the instruction of Jerry Tyson, who is the actual 3XK. So this whole thing, and this is where the whole spiraling of the obsession, 3XK's obsession with Castle comes from, is that Jerry Tyson commits those original 6 murders and then goes into jail to hide under the radar, gets his cellmate to get out and then kill people under the pseudonym 3XK with the exact same details, and then take the fall for it so that Jerry can continue killing. And it is after I don't even remember who the cellmate's name is, but not that it's important. After he confesses, we see Ryan and Castle going to alleviate Tyson from the motel, and Castle puts it together. And that foiling of Tyson's plan is where the obsession with Castle really forms, and we see that dynamic between the two of them.
Right. Yeah. And there's a lot of shows that do the reoccurring bad guy. He's your arch nemesis. He's the guy, the Mentalist had Red John. NCIS had one for Gibbs. So this was, you didn't know it at the time, but this ends up being Castle's arch nemesis, the guy who keeps coming back. Would you believe if I told you? Well, let me ask you this. How many episodes was Tyson in?
In or mentioned?
In. He was actually,
Seen?
Yeah.
Okay, let me think. 1, 2. I'm gonna go 3.
It was actually 4.
Okay.
But the character that he was in all the different, okay, now about how many episodes was he involved in as a plot, either mentioned or did something with him?
At least 2 more, because you have the plot line of Ryan's gun and I'm not going to remember the family's name, but he gives it to, it's used and it brings up Tyson again. It's the first time we see Tyson's name again after the original episode. And then later on, we see Tyson with Kelly Neiman, his girlfriend, and the lookalike kills with Laney and Esposito to get all his files and his DNA erased.
Right.
So at minimum 2 more.
Yeah, I think there's more like a total of 6 more episodes through the years where something is involved that goes back to a person who Tyson used, or because there's another one that I recall that has to do with the girl that they used to make look like Laney, because there was the plastic surgery where they made the 2 people look like Laney and Javi, and
I just
her name.
said that one.
Oh no, I understand, but I'm saying
Okay.
but there's a callback to that girl in a future episode. So, I wish I would have done a little more research on the Tyson character itself and the storylines that went along with it. But, he was such a major polarizing character that it seemed like he also kept going, like a Senator Bracken, or, just a character that kept reoccurring that was such a dominant force but as things kept going, we learned, and this could be why a Team Beckett person's more Beckett, even though the show's called Castle, it was more about Beckett and what she was going through.
Yeah. On the Tyson note, I think my favorite episode with him isn't more like him killing Wise. It's the episode where he's framing Castle with the girl, and it's the affair, and she's hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah.
I think I had nightmares about that episode for weeks.
Yeah.
Well, I always thought there was going to be a girl hanging from the bathroom ceiling, but that episode is really, really cool. But he actually does appear in that one. He breaks into the precinct and talks to Castle in the jail cell.
Right. Do you have a favorite episode or a few episodes that you would put up there as your favorites?
Definitely. I'd say top 3. I love the Blue Butterfly. I think that's a great one. I love the way they had the flashbacks with the characters that we currently have and using them. I also loved that Kate and Castle weren't together yet in the actual present storyline, but they're like the two lovers in the flashback timeline. And like looking at the PI's diary and all that, I just think that was just a really well done episode. And then the twist at the end that the PI and the girl are still alive was just so cool. I really liked the episode Tick, 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 and Boom. I know that's 2 episodes, but I'm going to call it 1 because it's a 1-part, 2-part, where the killer is obsessed with Nikki Heat and doing those kills. And then you have the character of Jordan Shaw come in.
Right.
I think she was a great character and provided a lot of cool insight to like Castle and Beckett's dynamic and what she thought of them, what they thought of her, along with just like those cases in general.
Yeah, that was Dana Delaney was the actress who came in. And,
yes.
But yes, and it's funny because we're so far into this, and that's the first time the word Nikki Heat was mentioned also, who is the character that Richard Castle decides to create in the image of Kate Beckett. That's his muse for writing the Nikki Heat stories.
Yeah. Yep. And I think doing those murders based on that and like carving the words and the bullets, and then you see him like know so much about, because it's the case where it's Ben Conrad is the actual killer that he sets up, and you hear Jordan Shaw say a quote, something like, how did he know all the key players in someone else's life? And so then they profile Ben Conrad and not the killer. And I just thought that was such a cool episode. And then for Castle to realize based on the left hand thing that he's still alive and Beckett's apartment gets blown up and everything, just overall great episode.
Definitely. And do you have a third one or?
Yes. I would say my third favorite is Still, where Beckett steps on the bomb.
Ooh. Okay.
And Castle and Beckett are together at this point, but we get all the flashbacks, and they're arguing about who liked who first, why they were partners, why they kept going around each other, all that. And I think it's just a really cool way to flash back in a lot of ways to like the past and what they did and how long it's been and all that stuff. And then along with that, you have a case in itself of trying to deactivate that bomb that she's standing on and everything. I think that was a really well done episode.
Right. 47 seconds. I think that's another one that they did a really nice job. Deserved credit for the editing involved, the storyline. It's the one where there's a bomb that goes off and they're using the camera footage the footage from the news and find out who did it. And they're recreating it from the different views of the people involved in the case. I think that one's also an excellent. You had mentioned 47 seconds earlier. So wanted to get back to that one.
Yeah, that is a great one. I think they did a great job with, as they got witness statements and they got more time, they like filled in, like you said, the way they edited it and played it from those characters' viewpoints, and the switching of the angles and everything just like turned out really cool out in front of the plaza.
So, do you have a favorite season overall?
I think the storylines and the cases and like the police work in season 2 is really interesting. They had a lot of really interesting cases. Those are like the ones where you have the, what's the word I'm looking for? It's the double down, I think is what the episode's called. It's where Beckett and Castle, along with Ryan and Esposito, each respectively catch murder cases. And they bet that, like, oh, Beckett and I are going to solve it first. And Ryan and Esposito are like, we're going to solve ours first. And it ends up being they're both involved. And it's the switched killers. I think
Right.
that was a really cool episode. You get the episode with Castle's ex-girlfriend Kyra with the bridesmaid.
Alyssa Milano.
Yes. I think there was just a lot of really cool cases in that season, but I like season 4 a lot, between Beckett and Castle, in that in between of, we know Castle loves Beckett, and we see Beckett in these therapy sessions, and we know she knows, and we know she also kind of feels the same way but isn't ready to open up. And you get a really nice dynamic between the two of them as they're trying to figure out that relationship and like where they fall. And I just think that provides a lot into their relationship. I like that season a lot.
Is okay, kind of a tough question here, but do you feel they should have stopped at season 6?
Absolutely.
And what makes you say that?
I love this show. Don't get me wrong. I've watched this show. I would say I put in at least 100 hours, if not way more. But the last 2 seasons just feel so far from, it's like we lost the point. Like, where are we? Like, what is going on? I don't mind, and I think this is still season 6 if I'm not wrong, where Becca goes to the AG's office and then she gets fired and she comes back and she's working again. Those are still fine. I don't watch them as often because honestly, I start to tail off at season 6. Like, when she goes to the AG's office, I start to lose more and more interest, and then season 7, I'm just checked out. Like, I don't even watch it half the time, to be honest. But the storyline of him going missing, and then the PI work, and then Haley coming in, and Lockset, just like, it takes such a left turn from where we originally started and what the other 6 seasons are about, that it almost feels like a different show.
And it's clear, everyone found out as things continued that Beckett and Castle, well, Nathan Fillion and Stanek they didn't like each other.
Correct.
And they wrote the stories so that they were separated as much as possible. And even when they were in scenes together, you could tell as somebody watching the show, it's not the same as it was when it started. And it was very unfortunate. There was a point where they were talking about doing a 9th season without Beckett, and they even signed a bunch of the cast to a 1-year contract, and they just never made it. But that brings us to the ending. What did you think of the ending?
I think it was too rushed. I understood where they pulled a lot of the points that they ended with, like along the lines of, it goes back to the guy that was the head of detectives, and they had planted those characters earlier on. Or not head of detectives, he was the greatest detective society, maybe it was. Right. Something like that. He pops up earlier, and we get that tie back to him with the Lockstat stuff, and
he ends up being Lockstat.
Yeah. And so we get those callbacks, and they're not too out of left field, but it almost felt too like, wait, what is going on? And then they end up getting shot at like the very end, and then it's like 5 years later, and they have 3 kids running around, and it's like, wait, we were just dying on the floor. What happened?
Right. That Caleb was
Yes.
the public defender who they end up realizing works with Lockstat. And then he shows up and puts bullets in them, and they're laying on the floor bleeding out, and they reach out and hold hands. And then they all of a sudden flash forward to the kids, 3, which, if you remember, there was the time traveler
Yes.
episode where he did say they would have 3 kids and she would end up a senator. But I just think they did this where, okay, we don't know what we're going to do if we're going to do a 9th season, so we're going to shoot this where one of them could be dead, both of them could be dead, or they both live, and they chose they both live and ended the show. And I feel it was a disappointment. I was happy that they both lived. I thought they might work it out, the 2 of them as actors and human beings, and they would end up having a 9th season. But I'm very glad they didn't, because as 7 and 8 went, it was pretty good that they ended up stopping when they did.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was almost just about cutting your losses at that point. I'm glad they got their happy ending. I'm glad it ties back to the time traveler in that case, but I think it was just one of those where it was its time.
Very true, very true. And both of them went on. Nathan Fillion, he's been in some Guardian of the Galaxy movies, and he's got his show The Rookie on ABC that is doing well. I think going on its 5th or 6th season. And then Stana, she had that show Absentia on Prime Video that I watched most of the first season and thought it was really good. So, good for them both. And I'm glad that they got together and this castle show happened. Now, have you ever read any of the books, the Nikki Heat books that came out?
I have not. It's been something I've always wanted to do. I have not gotten around to it though, but it has been something a lot of the times I'll end up in a Barnes and Noble, and they had them for a while, and then I would get there, or once I was finally like ready to buy them, I'd look, and of course then they're not there, and then for some reason I could just never bring myself to ordering it. Like, it's always easier for me, at least, to make those big purchase decisions. Not that it was big at all, but like those decisions to like, okay, it's finally time for me to tackle reading the Nikki Heat series in person, compared to maybe letting myself talk myself out of it when it's, well, maybe it's not the right time. I don't have enough time to dedicate to reading all of them, because I know once I start, I'm going to finish it. So not yet.
I did read Nikki Heat, and it's a good book, good story. I'm not a book reader as much. For those SPDM crew people who listen, obviously I'm a comic book guy. I have a comic book podcast on the SPDM crew website. So, but I did want to at least read one book. And I like the fact, the guy who created it, Albert Marlowe, I believe is his name. He created the show. He's Richard Castle. He's writing the books. But they put them out as Richard Castle. And after the series was done, they came out with 2 more books. So
yeah,
they ended up with 9, if I'm correct. So, well, Kyra, any last thoughts that you have on Castle as a series, or anything else you'd like to talk about? How great your dad is, or anything?
I don't think so. I think I got all my thoughts, opinions, comments, questions, concerns all out there.
Okay.
Any last things for you?
No, not really. I my daughter is an amazing kid. Very proud of her, and I'm so glad that I twisted her arm and we finally did this. I've been wanting to do this for a while with her, and thank you to Mike Hilty and SPDM crew for giving us the platform and letting me do this for a week and substitute in on the SPDM TV podcast. If there is anyone else who would like to check out my podcast, it is Comics Corner Podcast with B-Lar and Danny P. And you can find it anywhere you download podcasts. Kyra, is there anywhere people can look for you? No, they're not allowed to because your dad's an overprotective jerk. Okay, good to know. We'll keep that. So that's going to be it for this episode of SPDM TV. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe to anything and everything SPDM crew, wherever you get your podcasts. Join us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, X, and Blue Sky at SPDM Crew. Check out our website, spdmcrew.com. If you've got a podcast idea and you're interested in being part of the SPDM crew, email us at spdmcrew@gmail.com. Until next time, happy watching, my friends.